Rejection is an inevitable part of life, and it can stem from various factors, such as differences in background, culture, or perspective. How one handles rejection is
Calls
crucial.
911 and we get to hear the entire call while the stalker outside stands completely still. The uploader's personal information is of course edited out. Take a look.
Leading them to develop obsessive and harmful behaviors. In extreme cases, this can manifest as stalking, which can have devastating consequences for both the perpetrator and the victim. Today, we will be exploring the stories of the 5 most notorious stalker killers in history, who allowed their obsessions to consume them and ultimately ruin their lives. These cases serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession and the importance of respecting the boundaries and decisions of others. Welcome to the Mystery Law Archive. A big thank you to all our wonderful viewers and subscribers for tuning in to our videos. We're committed to bringing you more engaging and informative content that will entertain, educate, and intrigue you. Your feedback is invaluable to us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can improve and better serve you. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to sharing more fascinating mysteries and stories with you. Number 5. Monica Moggs. Mogg, a divorced mother of 3, had previously been in a 10-year relationship with her husband named Noel Dation. The relationship between Mogg and Noel Dation was initially peaceful and produced 3 children, whom Mogg cherished deeply. As a preschool teacher, she loved her children and husband, but apparently what she was going through was bigger than her, and her sweet, kind behavioral pattern changed after some time. Things took a turn for the worse in the last few years, particularly after Mogg was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. According to friends and family, Mogg's behavior became increasingly difficult for Noel Dation to handle, and he eventually ended the relationship. Noel Dation then started dating Lillian Kim, a 42-year-old woman with whom he shared a loving connection. Meanwhile, Mogg's behavior became more erratic and obsessive as she began stalking the couple for weeks. She also took steps to prepare for a violent confrontation, purchasing a .22 caliber rifle, practicing target shooting, and gathering materials like duct tape and rope. It seems that Mogg's inability to cope with the end of her relationship and Noel Dation's new romance with Kim ultimately led to a tragic and violent outcome. On a stormy night at a residence on Millbrook Road, where a woman named Mogg entered the home through an unlocked rear door, she waited inside the home before confronting Noel Dation and another individual, Kim, in an upstairs bedroom. The confrontation turned deadly, with Mogg shooting Noel Dation 6 times at close range in the chest and abdomen. A physical altercation then ensued between Mogg and Kim, during which Mogg pulled out a knife from her back pocket and stabbed Kim 14 times, causing severe injuries, including a severed right jugular and deep wounds to various organs. Mogg, dressed in a tan prison jumpsuit, with her salt and pepper hair pulled back into a ponytail and wearing black framed eyeglasses, appeared subdued as she stood before the judge. When asked if she had anything to add, she softly replied, "No." The prosecutor, Steele, described the case as a tragedy of epic proportions, as she recounted the charges and crimes committed by Mogg. The brutality of the 2 separate murders, which took the lives of Noel Dation and Lillian Kim, was emphasized by Grutenbauer, who argued that Mogg's actions were so heinous that she should never be allowed to walk free again. Grutenboer's statement highlighted the devastating impact of Mog's crimes on the families of the victims, particularly the children of Noel Dechen and the loved ones of Lillian Kim, and emphasized that Mog's freedom would be a cruel injustice to those who have suffered as a result of her actions. The sentiment was clear. Mog's crimes were so severe that she should spend the rest of her life behind bars, never again to breathe the same air as the families of her victims. The case against Monica Mogg was a disturbing one, with the prosecution seeking a sentence that ensures she spends the rest of her life behind bars. Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Grutenboer argued that the brutal and premeditated nature of the crimes warrants consecutive sentences for the two murder charges. On the other hand, Public Defender Robert Kalish suggested a 60-year sentence, which he believes is a more understandable and just punishment. According to Kalish, Mogg is aware that she will never be released, and the 60-year sentence would serve as a clear indication that the punishment fits the crime. The former preschool teacher, Monica Mogg, pleaded guilty in 2015 to 11 counts related to the murders of Arthur Noldeshen and Lillian Kim, which occurred on October 30th, 2012, at Kim's home in River Edge. The guilty plea suggests that Mogg took responsibility for her actions, which is a significant step in the legal process. Monica Mogg's case was a complex one, and her sentencing had been a long and winding road. Initially, she was sentenced to 2 life terms of 75 years each to be served consecutively, but this was later overturned on appeal due to its excessive nature. The appeals court ruled that serving 2 life terms was impossible, and as a result, Mogg was resentenced. However, it seems there's been another development, and she's now been resentenced to 80 years by Superior Court Judge Susan J. Steele. The judge handed down a new sentence for Monica Mogg, which includes consecutive 40-year terms for the 2 murder charges, as well as concurrent sentences for armed burglary, hindering, and stalking. The total sentence is 80 years, and Mogg will be required to serve at least 85% of that time before becoming eligible for parole. This means that she will have to serve approximately 68 years before she can be considered for release. Mogg will continue to serve her sentence at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility in Clinton, Hunterdon County. Number 4. Linda Riccio. Ronald Roos was a happy, easygoing young man who enjoyed surfing and softball in his home state of sunny California. Linda Riccio and Ronald Roos had a long-term relationship, having met in 1980 while working at Honda of Escondido. They started living together in September 1980 and stayed together for about 6 years, moving to an apartment in Vista in 1983. However, in April 1986, Roos decided to end the relationship and made secret arrangements to move out, renting a new apartment on Chestnut Street in Carlsbad. He even asked the manager of the new apartment to keep his whereabouts confidential, indicating that he was already concerned about Riccio's potential reaction. Unfortunately, the manager inadvertently revealed Roos's new address to Riccio on moving day, which likely set off a chain of events that would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. Roos's comment to the manager a week later, downplaying the mistake and suggesting that Riccio would have found him anyways. Ronald Roos's efforts to end the relationship and move on, Linda Riccio was not willing to let go. Ruse's continued financial support, including paying her rent and allowing her to use his last name for utilities, may have given Rikyo a sense of security and false hope that the relationship was still intact. The fact that they saw each other occasionally in 1986 suggests that Ruse may have been trying to maintain a connection with Rikyo, possibly out of a sense of obligation or friendship. The incident with the cubic zirconium ring is particularly telling. Ruse's intention was to give Rikyo a gift as a gesture of friendship, acknowledging their past relationship and the years they had spent together. However, Rikyo's interpretation of the gift was very different, and she began to claim that they were engaged. Ruse's complaint to a friend about Rikyo's claims of engagement meant that he was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Rikyo's behavior and was trying to set boundaries. Linda Rikyo's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and obsessive. When Ronald Ruse didn't invite her to his high school reunion, she took it upon herself to cancel his reservations, claiming to be his wife. This was a blatant attempt to exert control over Ruse's life and manipulate his relationships. The incident where Rikyo showed up at Ruse's apartment and refused to leave is also disturbing. Ruse's decision to let her sleep on the couch overnight suggests that he was trying to be kind and accommodating. But Rikyo's behavior was taking a toll on him. When his friend Ray Hieronymus called, Rikyo answered the phone, which further blurred the lines of Ruse's personal boundaries. Ruse's conversation with Hieronymus reveals that he was feeling trapped and suffocated by Rikyo's behavior. He wanted to move on with his life, but Rikyo wouldn't let him go. The confrontation at the beach, where Rikyo hurled insults at Ruse, shows that she was becoming increasingly aggressive and volatile. When Ruse started dating Vicky Woodruff, it seemed like he had finally found happiness and was moving on from the toxic relationship with Rikyo. However, Rikyo's phone call to Ruse's sister, Susan Fisher, reveals that she was still fixated on Ruse and was angry about being pushed away. Rikyo's claims that Ruse had told her to stop contacting him because he wanted to get on with his life suggest that she was aware of her own obsessive behavior but was unwilling to respect Ruse's boundaries. The situation with Linda Rikyo and Ronald Ruse continued to escalate, with Rikyo's behavior becoming increasingly erratic and threatening. When Ruse's sister, Susan Fisher, told Rikyo to forget about Ruse and move on, Rikyo's response was chilling. "I know you're right, but I just feel like killing him." This statement is a clear indication of the depth of Rikyo's obsession and the danger that Ruse was in. Rikyo's attempts to manipulate Ruse's relatives and friends by claiming to be pregnant were a desperate and deceitful tactic to try to get Ruse's attention. In reality, she was not pregnant. And this was just another example of her willingness to use any means necessary to control and manipulate Ruse. The vandalism of Vicky Woodruff's car, which was parked in Ruse's spot, was a clear attempt to intimidate and harass Ruse and his new girlfriend. Rikyo's subsequent actions, including obtaining Woodruff's address from the DMV and making threatening phone calls to her mother, demonstrate a disturbing level of fixation and aggression. Ruse's decision to apply for a temporary restraining order on October 28, 1987, was a necessary step to try to protect himself from Rikyo's escalating behavior. However, even after being served with the restraining order on November 3, 1987. Riccio continued to harass and stalk Ruse, showing up at his workplace and attempting to touch him, despite his clear desire to be left alone. The incident where Ruse was cited for battery after flicking a shop rag at Riccio is a tragic example of how the situation had spiraled out of control. Ruse was clearly trying to defend himself against Riccio's aggressive and unwanted advances, but he was cited for battery. The situation with Linda Riccio and Ronald Ruse continued to deteriorate, with Riccio's behavior becoming increasingly threatening and violent. On November the 8th, 1987, Riccio made a chilling phone call to Ray Hieronymus, who lived in Arkansas, and told him that she was going to blow Ruse's short ass away and then kill herself. This statement is a clear indication of Riccio's intent to harm Ruse and herself, and it's alarming that she was able to make such a threat without being immediately intervened upon. Later that evening, Riccio also called Ruse's sister, Susan Fisher, and told her that she was going to do something to your brother that I'm going to regret. This statement is also a clear indication of Riccio's intent to harm Ruse, and it's disturbing that she was able to make such a threat without being stopped. The confrontation between Riccio and Ruse at his softball game on November 11th, 1987, was a public display of the escalating tension between the two. The fact that Riccio showed up at the game and had a loud confrontation with Ruse suggests that she was becoming increasingly unhinged and unable to control her emotions. The discovery of Ruse's broken property at the Chestnut Street apartment on November 11th, 1987, and the subsequent verbal threat made by Riccio as Ruse and Woodruff were leaving for work further demonstrate the level of harassment and intimidation that Ruse was facing. The fact that Riccio was able to file a response to Ruse's request for a restraining order on November 12, 1987, and that mutual restraining orders were granted the following day, suggests that the court was attempting to address the situation. However, in hindsight, it's clear that the restraining orders were not enough to protect Ruse from Riccio's escalating violence. Linda Riccio's behavior continued to escalate, with a focus on obtaining a gun and making threats against Ronald Ruse and his girlfriend, Vicky Woodruff. On November 17, 1987, Riccio visited a gun store and explicitly stated that she wanted a gun to stop a person, which is a disturbing indication of her intentions. She purchased a revolver, but due to the 15-day waiting period, she didn't pick it up until December 5th, 1987. Meanwhile, Riccio took a trip to San Francisco to visit her brother, but it's clear that she didn't abandon her obsession with Ruse. When she returned, she discovered that Ruse and Woodruff had moved to a new apartment on Jefferson Street in Carlsbad, and she was able to obtain their new address from the Utilities Department. On December 5th, 1987, Riccio, now armed with the gun, left a threatening letter at the new apartment, which prompted Ruse and Woodruff to call the police. Officer Alex Mitkovich was dispatched to the scene and encountered Riccio in her car, warning her about the consequences of violating the court order and telling her to leave Ruse alone. Despite this warning, Riccio continued to harass and threaten Woodruff, mailing another letter that contained disturbing content. It's clear that Riccio's behavior was becoming increasingly unhinged and violent, and it's alarming that she was able to obtain a gun and make explicit threats against Roos and Woodruff. In one of the letters, she wrote, and I quote, "Seems you wound up in a place I warned you to back away from. There's no way in hell I was going to give you the opportunity to spend time with Ron. Hope your 3 months was worth this, bitch. No one is about to replace my 7 years. Unfortunately, this was the only solution. Ron made his bed, and I had to make sure he was going to lie in it. I told you I would get him in the end." On December 8, 1987, Linda Riccio visited the apartment complex on Jefferson Street, where Ronald Roos and Vicky Woodruff lived, to view apartments for rent. She chose the apartment next to Roos's and signed the rental agreement 2 days later. On December 14, 1987, Roos received a phone call at work between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. and cancelled his plans to watch Monday Night Football. Riccio testified that she made the call, telling Roos that she had rented the apartment next door and needed to talk to him. After Roos punched out of work at 5:12 p.m., Riccio waited for him on the landing of their apartment complex with a gun. At 5:30 p.m., witnesses heard 2 groups of shots, interspersed with a man's anguished and pleading voice. Following the shooting, Riccio fled the scene, drove to a phone booth in Oceanside, and called 911. She reported her location and stated that she had just shot Roos. Oceanside police officers found Riccio in the phone booth, where she surrendered and told them that the gun was in her automobile. Linda Riccio testified in her own defense during her trial, stating that her intention was to shoot herself in Ronald Roos's presence rather than to harm him directly. She claimed that she wanted to inflict emotional pain on Roos, who had ended their 7-year relationship several months prior. According to Riccio, when Roos saw her with the handgun, he lunged at her, and she went blank. This suggests that Riccio is claiming that she was not in control of her actions at the time of the shooting, and that Roos's actions may have contributed to the tragic outcome. However, the fact remains that Roos was mortally injured by 2 gunshots, and Riccio's actions ultimately led to his death. Despite her claims of intending to harm herself, the evidence suggests that Riccio's actions were deliberate and premeditated, and that she had been planning to confront Roos for some time. Linda Riccio was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison for the murder of her estranged lover, Ronald Roos Jr. Despite being convicted of the crime, Riccio maintained her innocence, stating, "I did not murder Ron Roos in court." She expressed sympathy for the Roos family, but her claim of innocence was likely seen as inconsistent with the evidence presented during the trial. The sentence reflects the severity of the crime, and Riccio will have to serve a significant amount of time in prison before being eligible for parole. Number 3. Lisa Michelle Lambert. A complex and disturbing situation unfolded in 1991, involving several individuals, including Lambert, Laurie Shaw, Lawrence Butch Youngkin, and Tabitha Buck. Lambert, who was reportedly obsessively jealous of Shaw, began harassing her after learning that Shaw had briefly dated Youngkin, with whom Lambert had a prior relationship and was pregnant. Shaw had reported to her mother that Youngkin had date-raped her, and shortly after, Youngkin resumed dating Lambert. Lambert's harassment of Shaw took various forms, including verbal assaults and appearances at Shaw's job. It was a complex and volatile love triangle involving Lisa Michelle Lambert, Lawrence Butch Youngkin and Laurie Shaw. Youngkin, who was Lambert's abusive, live-in boyfriend, had briefly dated Laurie Shaw after Lambert left him for a week. Although Lambert and Youngkin reconciled, Lambert's jealousy and resentment towards Laurie persisted. In an attempt to humiliate Laurie, Lambert devised a plan in July 1991 to enlist the help of other teenagers to lure Laurie out of her home, cut off her hair, and tie her up to a pole. However, the plan was foiled when two of the girls involved warned Laurie about the plot. On August 20th, 1991, Lisa Michelle Lambert had a confrontational encounter with the Shaw family at a store. According to Hazel Shaw's testimony, Lambert screamed obscenities and made vicious comments, including the claim that Lawrence Youngkin and Laurie Shaw had had intimacy during their brief relationship. Hazel Shaw responded by telling Lambert that Youngkin had actually raped Laurie and that they might press charges if Lambert continued to harass her. It's worth noting that Laurie Shaw had previously reported to the police on July 31st, 1991, that Youngkin had date raped her. The situation seemed to escalate over the fall, with an altercation occurring in a mall parking lot in November. Two witnesses testified that Lambert beat Laurie's head against a parked truck during this incident. Furthermore, a witness reported that Lambert threatened to harm Laurie if she told the police about the incident, saying that she had friends that would take care of Laurie and that she would kill her. These events demonstrate the increasingly violent and threatening nature of Lambert's behavior towards Laurie Shaw, ultimately culminating in the tragic murder on December 20th, 1991. Additionally, Tabitha Buck, a friend of Lambert's, was part of those who had several altercations with Shaw, including physical attacks at a mall, their high school, and a fireman's ball. Tabitha Buck had an unusual amount of knowledge about Laurie Shaw's daily routine and personal life, including details such as her school bus arrival time, class schedule, guidance counselor, and even how long it would take her mother to travel from their home to the high school. Buck also had access to Laurie's new phone number, which she obtained from an emergency contact sheet at their high school. According to witnesses, including Whitehead, Lambert had been harassing Laurie and had even planned to cut off her hair. Furthermore, witnesses reported that Lambert had made threatening statements about Laurie, expressing an intent to scare Laurie, then hurt her, then slit her throat. The level of premeditation and planning raises concerns about the potential for violence. The night before the murder, Lawrence Youngkin drove Lisa Michelle Lambert to a Kmart where she purchased several items, including rope, hats, and gloves. These items were later taken to the scene of the crime the following morning, suggesting a level of premeditation and planning in the events that unfolded. Hazel Whitehead left her home for what she believed was a legitimate appointment with her daughter's guidance counselor, unaware that the call was a ruse to lure her away from the house. On December 20th, 1991, Laurie Shaw was found fatally wounded in her home by her mother, Hazel Shaw. On the day of the incident, Youngkin dropped off Lambert and Tabitha Buck near the Whitehead residence, as testified in court. Buck then knocked on the door, and the two individuals forced their way into the home, leading to a violent struggle that ultimately resulted in Laurie's death. The events surrounding Laurie Shaw's murder are deeply disturbing and tragic. According to testimony, Laurie's mother, Hazel Shaw, found her daughter with a rope tied around her neck, which Laurie managed to cut with a knife from her kitchen. Despite her severe injuries, Laurie was able to breathe deeply after the rope was cut and even spoke to her mother, identifying her attacker as Michelle, which was Lisa Lambert's middle name. Sadly, Laurie's injuries were too severe, and she died in her mother's arms shortly after. The police investigation and medical examination revealed the extent of Laurie's injuries, including clumps of hair on the floor, bruises on her head, stab wounds on her back, and multiple cuts on her hands, legs, and throat. The medical examiner testified that the wounds to Laurie's neck and back were fatal and that she could have only lived for about 30 minutes after the attack. Despite the severity of her injuries, the medical examiner and another expert witness, Dr. Joseph S. Hannis, believed that Laurie could still speak and communicate, albeit in a whispering or mumbling tone. This testimony supports the fact that Laurie was able to identify her attacker as Michelle before she died, which is a crucial piece of evidence in the case against Lisa Lambert. Police reported that Laurie had sustained a 5-inch gash to the throat, a stab wound that punctured a lung, another that grazed her spine, several wounds to the head, and over 28 defensive wounds. An autopsy revealed that her left common carotid artery had been severed. Hazel was not at home during the attack, having been tricked by the killers into going to the high school to speak with a guidance counselor. A witness testified that on the morning of Laurie's murder, they heard a series of disturbing noises coming from above them. They heard the front door slam, followed by a scream and a thump on the floor of the bedroom. This initial commotion was followed by a period of about 6 to 8 minutes, after which the witness heard the door slam again. At this point, which was around 10 to 12 minutes after 7 o'clock, the witness looked out the window and saw 2 people who appeared to be of identical height, approximately 5 feet 7 inches, exiting the stairwell. Notably, Lawrence Youngkin is significantly taller, at 6 feet 1 inch, which suggests that he may not have been one of the 2 people seen leaving the scene. Following the murder of Laurie Shaw, police arrested Lisa Michelle Lambert, Lawrence Youngkin, and Tabitha Buck at a local bowling alley. During their custody, officers observed fresh scratch marks on Buck's face and shoulders, as well as wounds on Youngkin, which could be consistent with a violent struggle. However, it was notable that Lisa Lambert had no visible defensive wounds, despite being accused of participating in the crime. Additionally, a search of Tabitha Buck's purse revealed that she had stolen some of Laurie's personal items, including makeup, from the crime scene. Initially, the 3 suspects provided statements that implicated Lambert and Buck in the murder, with Youngkin claiming he had only dropped them off at the house and was not involved in the crime. According to court testimony, Lisa Lambert's story about the events surrounding Laurie Shaw's murder changed several times during questioning. Eventually, she settled on a version of events that placed most of the blame on Tabitha Buck. In a statement that was transcribed by police and signed by Lambert, she admitted that it was her idea to go to Laurie Shaw's apartment because she wanted to talk to her. However, Lambert claimed that Buck was the one who knocked on the door, allegedly because Laurie's mother knew Lambert and might have recognized her. According to Lambert's statement, she only entered the apartment after hearing someone answer the door. implying that Buck was the initial point of contact. This statement suggests that Lambert was attempting to downplay her own role in the events leading up to Laurie's murder and shift the blame onto Buck. However, their stories later changed, with Lambert alleging that Youngkin had been abusive and had encouraged her to harass and assault Laurie. Lisa Michelle Lambert was convicted on July 20th, 1992, for the stalking and brutal stabbing murder of Laurie Shaw, which occurred on December 19th, 1991. During the investigation, defense investigators noted that Lambert had a reputation for being a skilled liar, and her changing stories and claims throughout the case supported this assessment. Lambert's inconsistent accounts of the killing, as well as her allegations against her co-conspirators and law enforcement officers, demonstrated a pattern of dishonesty. As a result of her conviction, Lambert has been incarcerated in various facilities, including Cambridge Springs Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania, the Women's Correctional Facility in New Jersey, the Women's Correctional Facility at Baylor in Delaware, and most recently, Framingham Correctional Facility in Massachusetts. Her co-conspirators also received significant sentences, with Tabitha Buck being convicted of second-degree murder and receiving a life sentence. Lawrence Youngkin initially received a plea bargain resulting in a 1-year prison sentence, but due to perjury, the deal was revoked and he was ultimately sentenced to 10 to 20 years. Youngkin served 12 years before being released in 2004. In 1992, Lisa Michelle Lambert filed post-verdict motions arguing that her conviction was against the weight of the evidence. However, in 1994, the court reaffirmed her guilt, citing the physical evidence at the crime scene, trial testimony, and the history of ill will between Lambert and the victim, Laurie Shaw, as well as circumstantial evidence presented during the trial. In 1996, Lambert filed a lawsuit alleging that she had been subjected to abuse by a prison guard, James Iker, who had attacked her 6 times in 1994. She also claimed that another official had fondled her and that she was videotaped during a strip search. Iker was subsequently convicted of aggravated indecent assault and sentenced to 2 years in prison. In 1997, a federal district judge initially ruled that Lambert was actually innocent and ordered her release from prison. However, this decision was later overturned by a federal appeals court, which found that Lambert had prematurely brought her case to federal court without exhausting her available appeals in Pennsylvania. As a result, Lambert was returned to prison to continue serving her sentence. In 1997, Lisa Lambert's appeal was denied. The following year, in 1998, her conviction was upheld, and her claim that she was framed by prosecutors was rejected. Additionally, her request for release during the appeal process was also denied. In 2003, 8 law enforcement officers were cleared of misconduct in Lambert's case, further solidifying the integrity of the investigation and prosecution. Lambert's attempts to appeal her conviction continued, but in 2005, the Supreme Court refused to hear her case, effectively exhausting her avenues for appeal. As a result, Lambert remains incarcerated in Clinton, New Jersey, serving out her life sentence. In 2007, a Lancaster County judge made a determination regarding a civil lawsuit filed by Lambert against administrators at the State Correctional Institution, Cambridge Springs, where she was previously held. The state of Pennsylvania settled a lawsuit with Lisa Michelle Lambert, who had claimed she was sexually assaulted by guards at the Cambridge Springs State Correctional Institution. The lawsuit had been put on hold until Lambert had exhausted all her appeals in her criminal case. As part of the settlement, Pennsylvania agreed to pay $35,000, which will be used to cover court costs and restitution. Any remaining balance will go to Lambert's parents, who are raising her and Lawrence Youngkin's daughter. This settlement brings an end to the civil lawsuit, which had been pending until Lambert's criminal appeals were resolved. Tabitha Buck's sentence was revisited in 2017 due to a Supreme Court ruling that banned mandatory life sentences for juveniles. As a result, she was resentenced to 28 years to life, which is a significant reduction from her original life sentence. And just 2 years later, on December 21st, 2019, she was granted parole, which means she's now free after serving a portion of her revised sentence. Number 2, Joshua Stimson. Molly McLaren was a thoughtful and introspective person who approached relationships with care and intention. She was just 23 years old when she was murdered by her ex-partner, Joshua Stimson, from Stoke-on-Trent. According to her best friend Amy Lee, the victim was selective about her relationships and valued deep connections with others. She wasn't motivated by external pressures to be in a relationship, but rather sought meaningful personal connections. Joshua Stimson, a 26-year-old man from Stoke-on-Trent, initially presented himself as a charming and suitable partner to Molly. The two had been talking for a while before meeting in person, and Molly, who was in her first serious relationship, was drawn to their shared interests and experiences, including a love of exercise and similar struggles with anxiety. According to Molly's friend Amy, the couple seemed to have a strong connection, bonding over their common struggles and experiences. Joshua Stimson's initial charm and shared experiences with Molly eventually gave way to a more controlling and manipulative behavior. As the relationship progressed, Stimson's actions became increasingly possessive and dominating, causing Molly to feel like she was constantly treading on eggshells around him. Molly described his behavior as childish, suggesting that Stimson was prone to immature and possibly tantrum-like outbursts. This change in behavior likely created a sense of unease and fear in Molly, making her feel trapped and uncertain about how to navigate the relationship. It's also possible that Stimson's claims of struggling with anxiety and depression were used as a means to manipulate and gain sympathy from Molly, further exacerbating the power imbalance in the relationship. After Molly broke up with Joshua Stimson, he became increasingly aggressive and abusive. He started posting insulting messages on Facebook, making false claims about Molly, and sending her abusive texts on WhatsApp. Molly was understandably distraught and terrified, feeling like she was being stalked and harassed by her ex-partner. She confided in her friends, including Amelia Davis, and sent them screenshots of the online abuse, expressing her fear that Stimson might hurt her. The fact that Molly mentioned her parents were going away for 2 weeks suggests that she was worried about being left alone and vulnerable to Stimson's potential violence. Stimson's behavior was escalating and becoming more menacing, causing Molly to feel trapped and frightened. Molly McLaren took steps to report Joshua Stimson's abusive behavior to Facebook, but unfortunately, no action was taken. She then went to the police with her mother, Joanna, to report the incidents. A police officer called Stimson and warned him to stop his behavior. But Stimson's response, "Wouldn't we?" Component placement suggests that he was not taking the warning seriously and may have even been taunting the officer. Despite being spoken to by police on 2 occasions, Stimson continued to harass and intimidate Molly. He showed up at a bar where she was with friends, which must have been a terrifying experience for her. Molly had explicitly expressed her fear to her friends, saying that she was scared of what Stimson might do, and that she was scared he might hurt her. It's clear that Molly felt vulnerable and trapped, and that Stimson's behavior was escalating into a serious threat to her safety. Molly and her mother were taking steps to protect themselves from Joshua Stimson's escalating behavior, including printing out pictures of him and distributing them to neighbors to keep an eye out for him. Molly had also blocked him on all her social media accounts, and her friends had done the same in an attempt to cut off his access to her online life. However, it's chilling to learn that Stimson had found a way to circumvent these measures by recruiting another girl to follow Molly on social media and report back to him. This level of manipulation and control is a classic sign of stalking behavior, and it's terrifying to think that Stimson was able to gather intelligence on Molly's every move through this proxy. It's clear that Joshua Stimson's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and menacing. The fact that he followed Molly to her gym and worked out next to her in silence is a deeply unsettling and intimidating act. When Molly asked him why he wasn't at work, his response of "It's none of your business" is a clear indication of his controlling and aggressive nature. Molly's messages to her mother and friend Amy reveal her growing fear and anxiety. Her text saying, "I'm always looking over my shoulder," is a heartbreaking expression of her constant state of vigilance and fear. Despite being warned to stay away from Stimson, Molly was unable to escape his wrath. Molly, unaware of the danger lurking nearby, gets into her car after leaving the gym, still distracted by her phone. Meanwhile, Stimson has been stalking her, tailing her in his father's Peugeot, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The fact that he parked in an adjacent aisle and approached Molly's car is a deliberate and calculated move, showing a level of premeditation and intent. It's as if he had been waiting for this moment, planning and preparing for the attack. The next few moments would be the last of Molly's life, and it's heartbreaking to think about the fear and terror she must have felt as Stimson approached her car. The fact that he was able to get so close to her, to invade her personal space, and to carry out such a brutal and violent attack is a tragedy that could have been prevented. The fact that he stabbed her at least 75 times and cut her throat completely is a testament to the extreme level of violence and rage that he was capable of. She lost consciousness within seconds and couldn't be saved. The actions of Benjamin Morton, the dog walker who tried to intervene, are heroic and selfless. He risked his own life to try and stop Stimson, and his account of the attack is a testament to the brutality and ferocity of the violence. Morton's description of the attack, including Stimson's attempts to cut Molly's throat, is chilling. The fact that Stimson seemed determined to make sure Molly was dead, and that he continued to attack her even after she was weakened, is a clear indication of his intent and lack of remorse. The image of Stimson covered in blood, as seen in the police body cam footage, is a haunting one. The fact that he denied murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility but was found guilty and jailed for life is a small measure of justice for Molly and her family. The sentence of life in prison, with a minimum term of 26 years, is a reflection of the severity of the crime and the danger that Stimson poses to society. It's a reminder that violence and abuse can have devastating consequences, and that perpetrators must be held accountable for their actions. The sentencing of Joshua Stimson is a significant moment in this tragic case. Judge Adele Williams's words are a powerful condemnation of Stimson's actions, describing them as cruel, calculated, and cowardly, and an act of wickedness. The judge's statement that Stimson may never be released is a reflection of the severity of the crime and the danger that he poses to society. The judge's comments about Stimson's motivations are particularly noteworthy. The fact that he was seeking revenge against Molly for ending the relationship is a disturbing insight into his mindset. Number 1. Shirley Turner. Shirley Jane Turner was a Canadian-American woman who was born on January 28, 1961. To a U.S. serviceman and a local woman from St. Anthony, Newfoundland and Labrador. She grew up with aspirations of pursuing a medical career and enrolled at Memorial University of Newfoundland in St. John's to further her education. Shirley Jane Turner's relationship with Miles Doucette was marked by obsession and stalking behavior. After Doucette ended the relationship and moved away, Turner began to harass him with phone calls and even physically confronted him in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where she assaulted him with her high-heeled shoe. Despite Doucette's efforts to distance himself from Turner, including moving to a different country, she continued to pursue him, leaving threatening voicemails and making unannounced visits to his apartment. On several occasions, Doucette had to involve law enforcement to order Turner to leave him alone, and he expressed fear to the police about what she might do next. The incident on April 7, 1999, where Turner was found semi-conscious outside Doucette's apartment, having attempted to take her own life, is a disturbing and tragic turn of events. The fact that she was wearing a black dress, carrying a bouquet of red roses, and had written 2 suicide notes, including one addressed to Doucette, suggests a deep-seated obsession and fixation on him. The note to her psychiatrist, which read, "I'm not evil, just sick," is a haunting and complex statement that raises questions about Turner's mental health and her awareness of her own behavior. The fact that she received a gastric lavage at the hospital and was apparently saved from her suicide attempt is a temporary reprieve, but the situation is still fraught with tension and uncertainty. Doucette received a voicemail the next day, claiming that Turner had died. It was a mysterious and potentially manipulative move, and it is unclear what Turner's intentions were or what the consequences of this event would be. Shirley Jane Turner began dating Andrew David Bagby, an American medical student, in early 1999. Bagby was studying at Memorial University and was the son of Kathleen and David Bagby. In August 2000, Turner moved to Sac City, Iowa, to work for Trimark Physicians Corporation, while Bagby graduated from Memorial University and landed a surgical residency at the State University of New York, Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, New York. Despite the distance, the couple tried to maintain a long-distance relationship, with Turner visiting Bagby's residence in Syracuse 7 times and Bagby visiting her once in Sac City. During one of these visits, Turner allegedly burglarized Bagby's apartment. In the fall of 2001, Bagby moved to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, to begin his residency at a family practice. Turner left her job at Trimark in Sac City on July 10, 2001, and moved to Council Bluffs, Iowa, where she was hired by Allegiant Health System of Omaha, Nebraska. In October 2001, Turner obtained a permit to buy a firearm and purchased a Phoenix Arms HP-22 handgun and .22 ammunition, which she used during firearms lessons. Shirley Jane Turner exhibited possessive behavior towards Andrew David Bagby and harassed him over the phone. On October 13th, Turner told Bagby that she was 3 months pregnant, and Bagby agreed to discuss the pregnancy with her at a wedding he was attending. When Turner visited Bagby in Latrobe in late October 2001, they frequently argued about his new girlfriend. On November 3rd, 2001, Turner admitted that she had lied about being pregnant in an attempt to stay with Bagby permanently. Bagby, furious about the deception, drove Turner to the Arnold Palmer Regional Airport, broke up with her over lunch, and sent her back to Iowa on a plane. On November 4th, 2001, Shirley Turner made 3 calls to Andrew Bagby's residence in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, then drove 16 hours with a gun and ammunition to confront him. On November 5th, Bagby, visibly agitated, told a colleague, Simpson, about Turner's visit, but ignored advice not to meet her privately. He promised to visit Simpson afterward, but never arrived. The next morning, Bagby's body was found at Keystone State Park, shot 5 times with CCI .22 bullets, with wounds to the face, chest, buttocks, and back of the head. Evidence linked Turner to the crime, including cell phone and internet activity at Bagby's home, eyewitness accounts of her vehicle, and matching ammunition from her shooting lessons. A box of condoms found in Shirley Jane Turner's Council Bluffs apartment had a matching lot number to a box purchased by Andrew David Bagby in Latrobe on the night of their breakup. Additionally, MapQuest printouts with road directions to Latrobe were also found in Turner's apartment, despite claiming her gun was stolen and denying involvement. Investigators found incriminating items, such as road directions to Latrobe and items connecting her to Bagby. By the time authorities obtained a warrant for her arrest, Turner had already fled the country. Turner fled the country before her arrest warrant was issued. On November 12, 2001, Shirley Turner fled to Toronto and later resettled in St. John's, Newfoundland, with her oldest son. Surveillance by the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, RNC, uncovered evidence of her pregnancy with Andrew Bagby's child. On December 12th, Turner was arrested as extradition proceedings began. Despite facing murder charges in Pennsylvania, Justice Gail Welch released her on $75,000 Canadian bail, deeming her not a public threat. After giving birth to her son Zachary on July 18, 2002, Turner initially barred Bagby's parents from seeing him, fearing they would take him. She was briefly jailed again in November 2002, but Welch released her in January 2003, citing the presumption of innocence. On August 18, 2003, Zachary Turner was in his mother's custody when Shirley Turner purchased lorazepam from a pharmacy in St. John's. She mixed the drug into Zachary's baby formula, ingested a lethal dose herself, and then tied Zachary to her chest using a sweater. Turner jumped off the Foxtrap Marina fishing wharf into the Atlantic Ocean, where both drowned. Authorities determined Zachary was rendered unconscious by the lorazepam and did not suffer. Turner's body was later found on a beach by a vacationing couple with Zachary's body nearby. Thank you for watching. Stay informed with breaking news, captivating stories, and insightful updates by subscribing to our channel. Be sure to click the notification bell so you never miss a new video.